If you combine hip-hop culture, Fight Club, and Mortal Kombat, and then place them all within an Attitude Era milieu, you'll get something like Def Jam Vendetta. If your taste buds are particularly attuned, you might even catch stylistic notes of Twisted Metal Black, Grand Theft Auto 3, or Saturday Night Slam Masters within this weird rap-themed hidden gem. Oh yeah, and let's not forget the NFL Blitz flavor that's inherent in this EA Sports big concoction. I said in a past review that Fire Pro Wrestling Returns is a wrestling artifact. I'd say that Def Jam Vendetta is also an artifact, albeit a much stranger one. It definitely channels the zeitgeist of the time, but is it a cultural memory that we'll look back on fondly?
You see, when it comes to me, there ain't no difference between black or white. I'm them all, baby. I will have my fist up for black power.
I played Def Jam Vendetta right around the time of its release. I was 16. I still occasionally watched wrestling at that time, but I had definitely gotten into the nostalgia syndrome phase, always wanting the current content to be like the olden days. My longtime obsession with wrestling was starting to fade, at least for the time being. Don't get me wrong, I was pleasantly surprised by how playable Def Jam Vendetta was, but its control scheme was so similar to No Mercy on the 64 that it just kind of made me long for the original game. I mean, why would I go from a 4-player game with endless wrestlers, game modes, and movesets to a more gimmicky 2-player game with way fewer options? In fact, I think my friends and I popped No Mercy in later that same night. It's the gold standard of wrestling games after all. So I didn't give much thought to Def Jam Vendetta after that first night. My long hiatus from wrestling had officially started. Returning to Def Jam Vendetta now is like opening a time capsule. An experience that has been charming at times, but cringeworthy in others.
Used to be, you wanted to make yourself known. You'd prove your worth as a street fighter or hustler. We don't fight out in the streets no more. We're organized now. We too gangster for the garden, so we've taken it underground. Inside, I'm a businessman, and this is my business. My soldiers are Legion, Method Man, Nori, Capone, Luda, Redman, DMX. You want a shot at me, you gotta make it past these brothers. It's a dangerous world out here. Seems every time I turn around, there's another young buck wants to take me on. I lay down for no man. You want to take what's mine, you gotta beat me. But nobody ever beats me. Def Jam Vendetta.
Yeah. Crump. Right. Yeah.
Alright, let's talk about the best parts of the game, or what I'm going to call the high spots. I'd have to say that the controls are definitely a big plus in this game. I mean, if you've played No Mercy or its predecessors on the 64, then Def Jam Vendetta will be kind of like getting back on a bicycle. As a quick tutorial, you tap square and use the D-pad to do a weak strike, you hold square and use the D-pad to do a strong strike, tap X to do a weak grapple, hold X to do a strong grapple, you use circle to run or to Irish whip your opponent, you use the R button to block a strike or pick up the opponent, you use the L button to evade, grapple, or pin, and you tap L and R repeatedly to reverse, triangle gets in and out of the ring, and the right analog stick taunts and performs your special. If all of that sounds familiar, it's because it's straight off of No Mercy. Remember the stare down between two wrestlers when they run into each other in No Mercy? That same stare down is here too, with a little bit of a rough and tough upgrade. No surprise, since the control engine's based off No Mercy, it means Def Jam Vendetta is a joy to play on a mechanical level, only with a slight learning curve. For the most part, your timing and actions feel intuitive and controlled. Sometimes button mashing a series of strikes will help, but for the most part you need to be calculated and patient. One addition to the No Mercy control scheme is the specialized combo. One example is the Dishonorable Discharge, which is a strong strike in any direction, a strong front grapple, and then a head submission performed in a row. I was kind of disappointed that the combos weren't new or unique move animations, but they were literally just 2 or 3 move animations performed in a row. Another small complaint I have is that the hit detection and the frame rates are not quite as smooth and precise as No Mercy. There were quite a few times when both my opponent and I would simultaneously do moves in close proximity with no real result. It's just not quite as responsive and tight as its control scheme predecessor. As a side note, I appreciate the manual's instructions on how to pause the game, and I quote, "Are you getting beat like a little schoolgirl? Can't take the heat? Well, take a break from the action, calm yourself down, and pause the game. After you gather your thoughts, come back for more." I laughed when thinking about this, thinking about someone actually having to pause the game in order to cool down and walk off their frustrations from Def Jam Vendetta. I would also say that the flavor and presentation of this game should definitely be included under the high spots. Since the game riffs on an old engine and has limited game modes, the flavor is really what makes it worthwhile. For starters, the soundtrack is awesome, but that's pretty easy to do when many of the music artists are playable wrestlers in the game. You've got Method Man, DMX, Ludacris, and many more. All of this great rap music creates the perfect atmosphere for some thuggish, ruggish ass-kicking. At times, I've stopped what I'm doing in the menu just to listen and jam out. I'd have to say and In Cold Blood have particularly infectious beats. So tough.
That's why I still love you, and Russell still hustle. Let's get the pumping iron, and flex some real muscle. Up in this bitch, dude, my clique is Rick Rule, and I ain't got the ivory, this ain't the flick, dude. Somebody told me, y'all can hold me. Naughty by nature, do my dirt over my lonely. You need to back up, bitch, you don't know me. Gotta leave these hoes alone, they too nosy.
Started small time, dope game, pushing on the corner, 20-cent cooker, 50 flippers if you want them, full of formaldehyde, my clothes reeking marijuana, cops rolling up on us, my neighborhood's like a sauna, pistol ripping, the jury won't nobody run up on us.
The stages in the game are varied and apt for its theme. There are junkyards, warehouses, bridges, dance clubs. There's even a stage called Grimeyville. Honestly, my favorite is actually the empty after-hours arena with all the lights out. I've just never seen an option like that in any other game. Def Jam Wrestling is operated by a guy named D-Mob. He's a gangster with unscrupulous means who employs street fighters and lets crowds bet on the results. In fact, this has caused certain fighters to fall into debt, but more on that later. Outside of the rappers, you have a pretty wide range of choices, albeit stereotypical ones. Chuckles is a deranged clown, Roughneck is a hillbilly Confederate racist, Nine is a Cali gangster, Briggs is ex-military, Moses is a fire and brimstone preacher who's giving a permanent sermon of pain. Sometimes they feel like rejects from Twisted Metal Black. Other times they're more like background extras in the GTA series. You glean their characters from their appearances and from their pre- and post-match dialogue. Some are more memorable than others.
This ain't no tickle fight, little man.
We're gonna do this Confederate style, boy!
It is time to take out the trash.
Make some noise for Ashy Knuckles, man.
I'm gonna carve you up real nice, Vato.
Let's play a little game, shall we?
I break jaws for a living, that's my job.
You spend more time on your back than some of my bitches.
You just aren't hard enough, baby.
Most of the moves in Def Jam Vendetta are standard wrestling fare, like suplexes, powerbombs, camel clutches, Boston crabs. However, its special KO finishers are what blur the lines between a normal wrestling game and a fighter like Mortal Kombat. These special moves are more like fatalities than some kind of wrestling signature move. The bodies are mutilated and bent at impossible angles, skulls are fractured, necks are broken. It's no joke. There's no blood, but the specials are highly violent and very graphic, to the point where I laughed out loud at how over the top some of them were. The entire game lives up to its teen rating. It's crude, it's rude, and it's full of attitude. Its humor is definitely lowbrow. I mean, it even has galleries of hot chicks that you can collect pictures of. It's clearly geared towards adolescent males, and they're really nailing their demographic. But if there are any women out there who do play this game, God bless you. Please come and find me. Personally, I embrace the juvenile, anti-authority, wannabe gangster attitude of this game. even the parts that haven't aged in such a politically correct manner. I love that the flavor of the game could attract non-wrestling fans towards giving it a shot. It's guaranteed to elicit a few laughs. I will say that the story mode overall is rather shallow in the end. The game lets you choose between 4 different fighters. The Def Jam Vendetta Wikipedia page gives brief descriptions of each. Briggs is a dishonorably discharged soldier, Proof is an ex-superbike racer, Tank is a massive Japanese fighter, and Spider is a DJ. There's nothing in the game or the manual, other than their appearances, to suggest any kind of backstory. I decided to play with Spider based on his default stats, but the story mode plays out the same way for all 4 characters, regardless of your difficulty setting. Unlike the other fighters in the game, these default characters never speak, and their nonverbal reactions are all the same. So other than unlocking their alternate costumes, the story mode has very little replay value. The game starts with you wandering off the streets into an alleyway, and then into the back hallways of a club, where you meet your friend Manny, who needs you to step in for his fight because he's injured and he owes the promoter some money. He gives you the buddy-buddy speech, like you owe him one from all you've been through in the past. He tells you he'll be taking a dirt nap if you don't win tonight. Yikes. The game leaves a lot up to your imagination. I mean, what did Manny do for you in the past to merit this huge favor? Did you leave the wrestling game and get clean, and now Manny is dragging you back under? What were you doing before he called you? Were you just fighting on the streets? Without more info, it can almost seem like Manny is the one doing you a favor, getting you a gig and a big potential payday. After you win your first match, you run through all the local talent, earn some cash, and spend your money to upgrade your stats. You win some made-up championship belts, and you occasionally work tag matches with Manny. The way you spend your money is one of your only choices, other than what girl you date. That's right, after you win a few matches, a girl will approach you and get extra friendly. Then throughout the story, you are tempted by other lady suitors and you must choose your main squeeze. After you choose which girlfriend you want, you wrestle as the 2 women as part of the story. On one hand, it's nice to have 5 ladies you can wrestle with, but that's undermined by their schoolgirl outfits, their mini skirts, and their stilettos, not to mention their blatant eye candy role in the game. Remember those unlockable photo galleries I mentioned earlier? I gotta love how the Attitude Era's TNA booking style bled into this game. It's basically like wrestling with the Godfather's hose in No Mercy. Just as a little weird experiment, I did some intergender matches. It's not really recommended. I love women's wrestling, and I don't have any issues with intergender matches that have good booking, but in Def Jam Vendetta, I wonder if it'd just be better if the women weren't playable at all. Aren't half measures and patronizing much worse than exclusion? But alas, what would hip-hop culture be without its honeys? A la the GTA series, in Def Jam Vendetta, you receive text messages throughout the story, mostly from Manny or from Angel, your long-lost love who's now in a relationship with D-Mob, the monster heel. How convenient. She tries to deny her feelings and warn you about D-Mob, but you can tell she still has the feels for you. At one point she texts you to meet up and talk, but it's a trap by D-Mob, and you're jumped by 3 of his stooges for an impromptu tornado handicap match. Eventually, you wrestle D-Mob for a final blow-off to the feud. Things turn ugly, though. At one point, D-Mob pulls out his strap and shoots Manny, so you hop over the guardrails and come to his defense. Once you beat D-Mob, you win Angel back and you live happily ever after. D-Mob is dethroned, and Manny even survives the shooting. Story mode is fine, but I would have appreciated more backstory, more cutscenes, more individual flavor between the 4 character choices, like dialogue and some emotive nonverbals. I would have also liked more choices in the way to pivot your path, besides which girl to bang next. Tag team story mode with a friend would have been a great addition too. Basically, I just want more. Something to give any kind of replay value. I have to say this game is kind of the definition of one and done. I thought about upping the difficulty and trying to do story mode again, but why? Story mode itself is quite limited, and overall the game modes are pretty shallow. Survival mode is fun the first time, but I didn't get much out of my second play. Otherwise, you can do an exhibition, a tag, single, and handicap match. You don't have to be much of a wrestling fan to know what's missing. Hardcore matches, cage matches, battle royals, etc. Most of these match types were standard in the games of this era, and some were in the titles that came out before this time. I also would have loved a creator wrestler in this game, even if it was incredibly basic. Doing this story mode with one of my own invented hood rats would have been far more enjoyable. I know I'm asking for a much more expansive effort, with far more world building and depth than intended, but I can't help it. Wrestling feeds off of the story, the stipulation, the fantasy, the endless possibilities, and this game just doesn't deliver hard enough with its depth or its breadth. Along with the limited options, the movesets get a little repetitive after a while. For comparison, I've been playing Fire Pro Wrestling Returns for well over a year, and I still occasionally see a new move or a new reversal while playing with random wrestlers. On the other hand, if you're not counting Def Jam Vendetta's unique special moves, you'll easily run through its whole catalog in just a few evenings worth of playtime. Fire Pro doesn't have cutscenes or story mode, and it has primitive graphics, so everything's kind of a trade-off. I would say that every game has its programming limitations. As a final grade, I'd say that a 7.5 out of 10 is reasonable, but go ahead and just make that a 7 if you want. Considering I graded Fire Pro Wrestling Returns as a 9, I could comparatively grade Def Jam Vendetta as a 6 perhaps, or even lower. But I have to admit I have a little soft spot for this nugget of lowbrow trash. You'll find that this game pairs nicely with a Monster Energy drink and a Black and Mild. Ah, magnifique. Yes, the game is certainly culturally outdated, and it's quite limited in its single-player replay value, but I give it major bonus points for its music, flavor, and hybrid game formula. It doesn't hurt that it's a super playable, fairly fluid wrestling simulator in its own right. I got a complete used copy of this game for $30 on Amazon, but it seems like it's getting a little harder to find for cheap. The sequel runs for about $50 or $60 on Amazon and eBay. If you're intrigued, don't hesitate to give it a shot, but I certainly wouldn't say it's a practical choice for any modern, casual wrestling fan. Let's call Def Jam Vendetta an acquired taste. An acquired taste that I'ma slap out your mouth, sucker. In the comments below, tell me whether you've played Def Jam Vendetta before. Also tell me if you think the sequel is worth a look. Other than hip-hop, what else do you think would make for a good wrestling fusion video game? If you liked this review, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, or like the video, or share it with friends. I enjoy making the videos, and I would love if you could share it with the world. Don't fret, I'm not done with my pixelated wrestling vision quest just yet. I'll be turning back the clock soon to look at some more grappling titles on the Sega Genesis. This is Frankincensed, and thanks for watching.